In the studio with me today, I have a wonderful couple, Mike and Laura Kondratuk. I think I said it right.
You did.
They are here they're from Brookings, and they came down today to the Sioux Falls to be in the studio with me on Ash Wednesday. They've already been to Mass. I'm so impressed with you guys. I'm not going to be able to go to Mass till tonight, but that's okay. Everybody has their time, right?
That's right.
So they came down today to tell us about a book that they wrote. When did you guys write this?
It was actually a long process. We probably started it in about 2015.
Okay.
But it was just published this past year.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So this is, I don't know if Bill can get this. Okay, good. So this is By God's Grace, and it's a story about some of their experiences with God, really, and their family. So it's a great book. I've read most of it. I have a few chapters left, and I've really enjoyed it so far. So we're going to talk about it a little bit, what God's been doing in their lives. I'm sure some of this will be in the book, some of it might not be, and that's totally fine. So, all right. So Laura, let's start with you, if you don't mind. You tell us just a little bit about the two of you, your family, where you grew up, that kind of stuff.
Sure. I grew up in the Milwaukee area and met Mike when I was going to college, and we married and we ended up living up in northwestern Wisconsin for 17 and a half years.
Wow.
Before we moved here. Mike loves fishing, so that was a perfect place
That's
for
a great
us.
place for fishing.
It was. We lived on a small lake in northern Wisconsin.
Oh, wow. It's so beautiful up there.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good.
They call it God's country.
I don't know. They call South Dakota God's country, too.
Well, and it is. Every place has its beauty.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
We've got 3 children. So our eldest is Nathan.
Okay.
He is married, has 3 children.
Oh, wow.
And then our second is our daughter, Catherine, who is in her last year of residency as a
wow.
dermatologist.
And where is that at?
She's in central Pennsylvania.
Okay.
And then our youngest son, Eric, passed away just as he turned 14.
Right. And part of this book is about that experience, too. So we'll talk a little bit about that.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Laura, can you just tell us a little bit to start with about what is the book about in general?
You bet. The book is about how God worked in our lives to help Mike have conversion, to come closer to the Lord.
Because Mike was Catholic, but then it's just a deeper, different conversion, right?
Yeah, I was born Catholic, raised Catholic, but I was not a good practicing Catholic. Actually, when I was a child, I used to get sick all the time at Mass. And I would get, have to throw up.
Oh, my goodness.
Then when I left Mass, I was fine. And
That didn't leave a good impression on you, did it?
No, it didn't. But when I met Laura was very faithful, practicing Catholic. I was not. And to impress her, I started going to church with her.
That's one way to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Should I just keep
So,
going?
yeah.
So the book starts out talking about what happened to me. So at the time, I started going to church, but quite honestly, I used to tell Laura, our kids were young, and I would tell Laura, would you rather I go to church and think about fishing, or would you rather I go fishing and think about God? And I was serious about it. And there were times where Laura went with the kids by herself,
Right.
and I would go fishing. And that's where I was at. The only prayer I learned was the Our Father. I went through CCD and everything, but I goofed off all the time.
Sure.
I just was not a good Catholic. And then what ended up happening was I had my own business in northern Wisconsin, and one night, I had a lot of stresses, and then one night went to sleep, and I don't know how to describe it. I call it a dream, but I actually thought I died.
Oh, wow.
I had an experience where I found myself standing on a hill, and it felt like I was really there, and I saw rocks in front of me. It was that twilight. It wasn't daytime, wasn't night. It was that in-between time, and I saw shadows kneeling and praying, like a chanting prayer, and I know now it was the rosary. I didn't know that.
Sure, right.
Because I didn't know the rosary.
Right.
But anyway, I'm standing there wondering, I worked out all the time, and I'm like, I thought I died. And I'm like, what happened? Where am I at? And then all of a sudden I started looking around, and I was standing by a statue of Mary, and this euphoric feeling came on me, almost like an old radio where you have a volume button,
Oh, sure. Yeah.
where there was nothing, and all of a sudden I see the statue, it starts turning up, and then it just kept becoming more and more euphoric as I looked up eventually to her face. And when I looked at her face, the statue came alive. And all it did was smile, look towards me and smile. And I flashed back to my bed, and I was shaking, and I was just freaked out. I did not know what happened. And I call it a dream, but it felt so real, like I was there. And it scared me.
Right.
And I woke Laura up, and I was probably talking 100 miles an hour and explained to her what had happened.
Right.
And I kept saying, what does this mean? What does this mean? Because it really scared me. And she just, all she kept saying was, Mike, I don't know. You have to pray about it.
Right.
But where I was at that time was, I remember looking at her and very coldly saying, pray about it. What's that going to do for me?
I was just thinking that, yeah, because we had talked about your story a little bit, and I know that you weren't really in a place necessarily where praying about it was going to be your first thought.
Yeah.
Right.
So that was tough. And actually, after that, we didn't talk about it again. But in my head, it scared me so for a couple weeks. It was just in my head. It really scared me. And then I let it go, and I had another one. And maybe I shouldn't be going through all of it.
Well, and so go ahead. I mean, go ahead and continue.
I'll try to
but
shorten it.
Yeah, do
so
a little short, because I don't want to give everything away from
Right.
the beginning of the book.
Yeah, and this is like chapter 1 maybe.
Right.
But, no, and so eventually I had a second dream where I saw Jesus, and I saw what I was like. And when I popped back out of that one, I remember pacing around the room and woke Laura up, of course, and I'm like, I think I'm going crazy. I don't understand what's happening. And as time went, all of a sudden, as I'm pacing around the bedroom talking about this, all of a sudden a word popped in my head, and the word was Medjugorje. And I had no idea what the word meant.
Right.
And I remember looking at Laura and just, Laura, what does the word Medjugorje mean? And she just looked at me and said, I don't know. I've never heard of it. And I said, well, I've never heard of it, but it just popped in my head.
Right.
It's got to be religious. You go to church all the time, find out what the word means. And
Come on, Laura.
so, so long story short, I eventually ended up going to this place
Right.
reluctantly because I didn't believe any of the things that people were telling me, but I went because I wanted to know about these dreams.
Right.
And I saw what I dreamt there
Right.
and had a big conversion.
Right. And so the first part of the book really is about your conversion story and really how that kind of affected your whole family.
Right.
Yeah. So why did you guys write the book? Because that's really, there's much more to this than just that conversion story.
Right.
So why did you write it?
Well, when Mike came back from that experience, he was a changed man. He was completely different. And he wanted to be able to share his testimony with people.
Right.
And so he did that. So whenever an opportunity arose, he would share what happened to him. And whenever he would share that, people would say, you need to write a book. They'd be like, wow, you need to share that. And so that was that part. But then when we lost Eric, and like we share in the book, all the really incredible miracles that God gave us to help us heal from that loss and let us know that our son is in heaven, that added to Mike's conversion story. I think the Holy Spirit just really spoke to my heart and said, you need to write this.
Right.
And at the time, I was very much journaling as a healing tool for myself. Just get it out, get it on paper. And so I just was writing all the time during that time. And so when it was like, okay, we're gonna share this, and I started writing it out, I could refer back to the journal and actually get the exact date when that thing happened because I wrote about it when it happened, and I could glean from that the emotion of the moment because I wrote it down when it happened.
Yep.
And so that started writing it out. But when I started writing it, I was writing Mike's part from having heard him share his story,
Right.
and I was like, Mike, you need to go through this and you need to write your part because it needs to come from you.
Yeah. I
And
think
so
that's a big part of the book is to hear the two sides of how you were both experiencing it. I think was really important. So there's an obvious turning point in the book when your son Eric commits suicide.
Yeah.
But there's all of these things that happened prior to that, your conversion, all of those things. That had to help you deal with now this terrible tragedy in your family. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We, when you're going through something, you don't think about those things. But when you look back on it, we could look back and see how God had put in place and just laid a solid foundation for our faith prior to our loss of Eric, so that we would have the ability to hold on to him with our might through that experience, and just know that he was walking with us through that.
Right. Because this is when this type of thing happens, it's extremely hard on families. And I'm sure it was probably hard on your family, even with that foundation.
Yeah.
But had you not had that, it's hard to say where you would have been.
That's a very good way to put it. But the experiences, our faith was very strong, or is very strong, and was at that time. And I think that was the glue that helped hold all of us together.
Right.
Our son Nathan, our daughter Catherine, and Laura and I.
Yeah.
And too, from the moment of our loss of Eric, we were looking to God
Right.
to guide us, to give us the graces that we needed in that moment, because we knew we couldn't do it on our own.
Right.
It was too devastating.
Yep.
So we were seeking him. We were seeking, we were really open to whatever signs he would give us, and asking for them. And by the power of the Holy Spirit, we could recognize those signs when they came for what they were.
Right. And even with the kind of foundation you had, as humans, it's really easy for us to say, okay, God, I'm really mad at you, so I'm not going to look for these signs, and I'm going to, So even with that foundation, we can still go off on a direction that's really bad for us. So I'm glad you guys chose to stick with God and try to understand, or at least let him help you. Yeah. So can you tell us just a little bit, if you just joined us, we're talking to Mike and Laura Kondratuk. Did I say it right again? Okay. And their book, By God's Grace. Can you tell us just a little bit about Eric? Would you mind? A little bit about Eric, and just a little bit about what happened. Maybe a couple minutes worth.
Sure. Well, Eric was our youngest, and from very, very little, he was a very unique little person, very imaginative. He was kind of our three kids, he was a combination of the two of us, where he had Mike's engineering creative mind that way, and he had my artistic bent, where he was musical, and he was we shared some of his poems in the book, and he saw beauty in everything to the minutest detail. He'd be like, look at this, and he'd be so excited about it. And he was very funny. He just would, these little one-liners that he would shoot out that would just
so he had a
laugh.
wit about him.
He had very much
wit.
so, yeah.
And a very soft heart. Very like he was very much pro-life, and he was very strong of that even if people disagreed with him at school, he would still stand up for that.
Right.
And it didn't matter what happened, he would stand up for that.
That's unusual for a kid his age.
Yeah, and
especially a teenager or anything like that.
Yeah, he was, just so the listeners know, he had just turned 14 years old July 24th, and he passed away on September 13th. So he was just 14 when he died.
Yeah.
There were, so we found out after his death that he was being bullied some. Now, Eric was a very big, so I'm 6'3", and he was almost as tall as me when he was 14.
Wow.
But
when you stand out, you're an easy target for bullies.
Yeah, and I think his strong beliefs, and he wasn't afraid to stand up for it. But we found out that he was not physically, but socially, mentally, being bullied at school, which was hard too, because we had to forgive, right, the others, and that was probably easier for some than others in our family.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But he was. It would have been fun to see where he went. He had just started guitar lessons. I think he had only been doing it for about a year.
Sure.
But I remember waiting to pick him up, and people would come early to hear him because they felt like they were hearing some great guitarist playing. They were just unbelievable. And he was writing his own songs and music at the time.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
He was very fun. You talked about a line in the book.
Yes, yeah. Let's read that line really quick, because this line really stood out to me in this section of the book. It's on page 96. It says, the space that one person occupies in the hearts of those who love him is immense. And that really hit me at the moment I read it. I actually highlighted it and turned the corner down and everything. So yeah, can you talk about that a little bit?
Just Eric was a big personality, and like he was either playing his music, his electric guitar, which was wah wah wah, really really loud, or we'd be watching TV and he would constantly interrupt because he always had questions and things he wanted to share,
Sure.
and so he was always a big presence in our home.
My mom would get along really good because she does that when she's watching TV.
Yeah, he was such a big presence in our home, and so when I wrote that, I was thinking about how when he was gone, it was silent
Yeah.
in our house.
Yeah.
And I thought about that space that he created for himself, not only in our home physically, but in our hearts.
Right.
Like he had carved out this space for himself in our hearts that was never going to be filled
Right.
by anybody else.
Right. Right.
And that's
I think
what
that's very true. And really, at this point, the only one who can fill that empty space is God. And thankfully, you guys allowed that to happen, and maybe are still probably allowing that to happen, because this is not a quick process, I
No,
imagine.
it's lifelong.
Yeah.
It's, probably the best way to describe it is if you, and I don't know what it's like to lose a limb, but we're not the same people we were before.
Right.
And the only thing I can try to relate to, Laura's said this before, is like a person that loses a limb. They still go on, and life goes on, and they look basically are the same person, right? But they're never the same.
Right.
And that's
You
what
learn how
happened
to
to us.
survive without.
Right. Right.
Yeah, you've lost something, and we're different people than we were before.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that kind of thing can't happen without major changes to the people who experience it. So I'm sure your other two children are different as well since then, because they lost their sibling. So
Yeah.
So now then the next part, the book is 3 parts, right? I think I'm in the third
Basically.
part. Is it, or is it 2 parts? Whatever. It
No.
feels like it's 3 parts. Because
Well,
you have the before.
it's like our life is cut in two. Before our loss of Eric,
and then after.
Yeah.
So, and then after, a little while after his death, you both, I believe, started going back to Medjugorje.
Yeah,
And-
actually, I think I had gone 3 times before Eric's death, and then Laura, actually, we had a trip set up for her to go right after Eric's death, and that was set up before he passed away.
And that was really healing for you
It
to
was.
go there, wasn't it? I just
Yeah.
finished reading that part, and I felt like that was a really important thing for you to do.
Yeah, it was, and like, so it was just 6 weeks after Eric's death that I'm supposed to go to Medjugorje, and I said, I don't want to go. I don't feel right leaving the family. And Mike said, you need to go, because whatever graces you're going to receive, they're not just for you, they're for all of us. And we need all the graces we can get right now. So I went, and there were some really miraculous
Yes.
things that happened.
Yeah, for sure. And how important has your faith become since?
It's the center of our life.
Yeah. And it was before Eric died, but it's increased now. Is that right? Would you say that?
Yeah, I would say. I think. I'm not sure. How would you say it?
I think it just before Eric's death, it was a part of who we were. But after Eric's death, it's like we can't live without.
Like, it's the air you breathe.
It is
literally.
like we know, and we've had experiences since then that have been tough as well. I just had a bout with cancer in the last year,
That's right.
and so when these things come, we know we can handle them because God is in it with us.
Yeah.
And we're not walking this journey alone. He's walking every step of the way with us, and he will give us the graces that we need in the moment that we need them. And we just have to stay strongly attached to him, holding on.
For sure.
It's where we turn whenever anything happens. And so Laura initially was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and it was growing quickly.
Right.
So things did not look good at all. And I can tell you, I mean, there's no one to get mad at. It's life.
Right.
But I mean, every waking moment, I just prayed. I don't know how many rosaries I said. I don't know how many chaplets, and but it's still the center. It's everything we turn to, and we don't start our day. We get up early in the morning, by 4:45, we're praying our first rosary of the day together.
Wow.
And we always start our day with that.
Yeah. You guys are really inspirational. I'm glad you wrote the book, because there are a lot of people who go through that particular thing, a suicide of a child, or similar things that really need some sort of, hey, this can be done, even though it's really, really hard. So I'm really glad you guys wrote the book. We're just about out of time. So that went so fast. 20 minutes just goes so fast sometimes. So I want to make sure that people know how they can get your book. So Mike, will you tell them what's the easiest way to do this?
Yeah, the easiest way is to Google, and you need to use our last name, so I'm going to spell it slowly here.
Yeah.
So our last name is Kondratuk, Kondratuk, and then follow that with By God's Grace.
Mm-hmm.
So if you Google Kondratuk By God's Grace, there's going to be several sites that'll show up: CatholicShop.com, Medjugorje.us, and Medjugorje is Medjugorje. It's available on Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
There's a Kindle version available, and you'll see all that when you Google
Right.
Kondratuk By God's Grace.
Right. If you can buy it on a place like Catholic Shop, I think that's a great place to do it. If you've never been to that website, it's a good website. They have all kinds of cool
Yeah,
stuff.
they
so.
do.
Yeah.
All right, good. Thank you guys so much for
Thank
coming in. And I wish we had more time, but you know what? I don't want to give away everything in the book. So there's a lot of good stuff in there, a lot of very inspirational stuff. A lot of miracles have happened to you guys. So I hope that people will pick it up and take a look at it. I think it'd be really, really helpful for a lot of people.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, you bet.
Thank you.
All right. If you haven't found us already on social media, you can find us at Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and at YouTube at SF Diocese. You can also find us anytime at sfcatholic.org. That is it for us today. Hope you'll join us again next week for more Catholic Views.